In the dark quiet of the galaxy, where worlds spoke in soft pulses of light and faint waves of scent, humanity arrived like a storm. For millions of years, the great species of the Council of Luminants had perfected the art of communication through silence. Each word a ripple of color across chitinous shells, each sentence a gentle perfume swirling through the air. Their great debates, conducted in fragrant spirals and shimmering hues, could last months without so much as a sound. Their histories were painted across the void like fireflies and memory mists. And yet here, in this cathedral of quiet, the great hall of the council, came humans. It was not their technology that caught attention. Humans arrived in a battered diplomatic ship no more advanced than any other junior member of the council. It was not their appearance. They were fragile and pink, wrapped in curious cloth. It was not even their warlike history, which the council had already dismissed as a primitive symptom of a young, noisy species. It was what they carried in their throats. The first human delegation stepped into the hall, led by Ambassador Lyra Kai. She was tall for a human, dressed in black with a thin silver scarf around her shoulders. Her attendants carried strange instruments in their arms, violins, they called them later, but most strange of all was the sound she made. When Lyra opened her mouth and spoke, the galaxy fell silent in terror. It was a simple greeting, 3 syllables in her tongue. Good morning. But in the council chamber, the air itself shuddered. Members of the Luminant Council recoiled instinctively, their neural lights flaring in chaotic, blinding patterns. A cloud of perfumed fear and pain burst across the room as some of the more sensitive members convulsed and fell. Even the hard-shelled Ostru collapsed under the weight of the human voice. The Safin delegates, who communicated through delicate pheromone nets, simply dropped where they stood, unable to maintain their patterns. Lyra froze in horror, but only for a moment. Then her training took over. Earth had prepared her for this. When humans first intercepted alien signals, long threads of light and faint waves of chemical trails, linguists and xenologists had despaired. There seemed no place in such a world for a species like theirs. Where the galaxy valued subtlety, they were blunt. Where the galaxy prized quiet harmony, humans were noise incarnate. But one scientist, a frustrated opera singer from Naples named Antonio Riva, had proposed a radical theory. The power of the human voice might be humanity's strength. Sound could reach where light could not. Sound could bypass the careful rituals of light and scent and strike directly at the brain. Tests on early alien envoys confirmed it. Even whispers of human speech registered as catastrophic to alien neural networks. The human voice was a weapon, and so Earth trained its diplomats accordingly. The first generation of interstellar ambassadors came not from the universities of politics or science, but from the great opera houses, metal clubs, and underground scream stages. Lyra Kai, chosen as Earth's voice, was both a celebrated soprano and an expert in controlled sonic modulation, trained to wield her voice as both a miracle and a threat. Lyra took one breath and, instead of words, sang, not the full strength of her aria, of course, just enough. A thin, gliding note, soft as silk. A C-sharp threaded with gentle vibrato that hung in the chamber and calmed the chaos it had just caused. Her attendants raised their violins and matched her tone, weaving a quiet lattice of sound around her. The light flares of the council dimmed. The scent of panic faded. A silence, deeper now, fell over the hall as every alien in the chamber watched her in terrified awe. Forgive me, she said gently, lowering her voice to a near whisper. We mean no harm. Even that whisper sent a tremor through the room. But this time no one collapsed. On the council's dais sat the elder of the Luminants, a vast, translucent being like a floating jelly of light, known as Ishranvel. It recovered quickly, its colors stabilizing into a measured gold. Its attendants helped the fallen back to their places, though some still quivered, their shells twitching involuntarily. You, Ishranvel began, its light fluttering like candle flames. You dare bring such chaos here? Lyra bowed her head. We do not wish chaos, only peace. Ishranvel's body flared an angry red. Your noise rips through us like lightning. Your words are weapons. Lyra kept her voice low and steady. That is why Earth has sent me, to show you that our voice can heal as well as hurt. The council buzzed faintly, an unsettling mixture of perfume and flickering light as they deliberated. Several delegates glared at Lyra. Others hid behind their attendants, clearly frightened. This was supposed to be a demonstration of cooperation, hissed another delegate, a tall, crystalline being whose facets glinted with green disapproval. Instead, you bring war sounds. Lyra took another breath. She wanted to explain, to pour out the thousands of years of song and speech, to show them that human sound carried joy and love as easily as destruction. But her orders were clear. No more than 2 sentences at a time. Any more, and she risked triggering another neural collapse. We can control it, she said softly. Please, let me demonstrate. A murmur of lights passed through the chamber. Ishranvel floated silently for a long moment, then pulsed a dull violet, the signal for reluctant consent. A dais was cleared in the center of the chamber. Lyra stepped into the light. She motioned to her attendants, who quickly tuned their violins. Rook, a scream artist clad in leather, stood at her side, his head bowed, silent for now. Marcel, a tenor, waited just behind them, fingers flexing nervously. Lyra raised her chin, took a deep breath, and began. It was not a word this time, nor a greeting. It was a melody, a quiet aria, carefully constructed to resonate with the harmonic frequencies of the chamber. Her voice lifted slowly, gentle enough not to cause pain, yet strong enough to fill the great hall. Her notes rose and fell, weaving through the alien minds, washing away the residual panic. The colors of the council began to stabilize, shifting from jagged reds to soft blues. The scent in the air turned sweet, almost reverent. Lyra sang of Earth's oceans and skies, of children laughing, of grief and triumph. She sang of her own ancestors who once gathered in stone cathedrals and wooden theaters to share in the glory of sound. Her voice was not just heard, it was felt. Alien shells vibrated in rhythm. Pheromone clouds thickened, then cleared in synchrony with her crescendos. Even Ishranvel's massive, alien body quivered faintly in time with the music. When she finally stopped, the chamber was utterly still. The silence that followed her final note was different now. Not hostile, but full of possibility. Ishranvel's lights blinked weakly for several moments before stabilizing into a cautious white glow. You have much to explain, human, the elder said at last. But perhaps you're not entirely a mistake. Lyra inclined her head, allowing herself the smallest smile. Thank you, elder, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Still, even that whisper sent a faint ripple through the assembled beings. And though no alien dared to say it aloud, they all knew the truth. Humanity had arrived. And in a galaxy of silence, they would never be ignored again. The galaxy was not ready for humans. After Lyra Kai's demonstration at the Silent Accord, the Council of Luminants reluctantly acknowledged humanity's right to speak and to stay. But their grudging acceptance did little to still the whispers of fear that followed her wherever she went. To the galaxy, the human voice remained a weapon barely sheathed. Yet even as the Council debated and disapproved, war broke out on the edges of their domain. 2 ancient empires, the Astra and the Velen, locked in an escalating conflict over a nebular star cluster. Entire fleets of silent light warriors clashed against each other, exchanging barges of blinding pulses and pheromone clouds that choked space for weeks at a time. Both species, descendants of civilizations older than human fire, considered themselves guardians of galactic balance. But this time, their scents clashed too hot, their lights burned too wild, and negotiations collapsed. It was, the Council decided, the perfect test for humanity. If Lyra's kind truly believed their voices could heal as well as harm, let them prove it in the crucible of war. Lyra had never seen so much color. Her shuttle descended into the contested system, where clouds of luminous gas painted the darkness with shifting ribbons of light. The twin homeworlds of the Astra and Velen spun like twin jewels on opposite sides of a brilliant blue sun. But the beauty was shattered by chaos. Warships flashed in and out of the gas fields, their light beams clashing, weaving violent patterns across the void. Scent bombs drifted like deadly flowers, trailing streams of acrid pheromones that sent whole squadrons into panic. Even from orbit, Lyra could feel the discord, faint vibrations in the hull, sourness in the air. Her violinists and scream artists shifted nervously, their expressions tight. Rook, her lead scream artist, stood at the viewport with his arms crossed. His black leather coat gleamed faintly under the shuttle's lights. "Smells like a slaughter," he muttered. "It is a slaughter," Lyra said, adjusting her scarf. "That's why we're here." They landed on a neutral moon, a barren world pocked with craters and broken monoliths where the Astra and Velen envoys had agreed to meet. The meeting hall was little more than a cavern, its walls carved with luminescent glyphs depicting centuries of peace, now obscured by the jagged stains of war. Lyra stepped into the chamber, Rook and Marcel at her flanks. A small orchestra of humans followed, carrying violins, cellos, and their own strange instruments. Wind chimes made of obsidian, long flutes carved from bone. The alien envoys were already waiting. The Astra delegation stood to the left, tall, insectoid creatures with translucent shells that shimmered with violent reds and yellows. Their scent was sharp, acidic, filling the chamber with hostility. To the right, the Velen waited, willowy beings of crystalline flesh that refracted light into fractal rainbows, their pheromone clouds bitter and smoky with rage. Both sides hissed at each other silently, exchanging scent threats and blinding flashes. When Lyra spoke, the room froze. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice low but firm. Even at this volume, the walls trembled faintly. "We come not to shame you, nor to harm you, but to bring you back to balance." The Astra leader's shell flared hot red. "Your balance is a scream." The Velen envoy's crystals crackled into jagged black. "You bring thunder into our silence." Lyra raised a hand for quiet. "And yet you are here," she said. "You agreed to listen." Silence fell, brittle, uneasy. She stepped forward, letting her scarf slip from her shoulders, revealing the dark gown beneath. "We have studied your patterns. We understand your lights, your scents, your silences. But you have never heard our song." The alien delegates recoiled slightly. One Astra warrior hissed and covered its sensory plates. Lyra nodded to her orchestra. "Begin," she said. The chamber filled with the faintest threads of music. Marcel, the tenor, began humming, a gentle, resonant tone that didn't quite reach language. The violins added a shimmer of harmony, their bows barely grazing strings. Lyra opened her mouth and let a single note escape, soft, deliberate, and for a moment, the alien delegates held still. The music spread like a bomb, weaving through the air, damping the acidic scents, softening the flashing lights. Both sides lowered their defenses, and for the first time in months, the Astra and Velen stared at each other without venom. But the calm didn't last. One of the Astra soldiers twitched violently, its shell sparking crimson. Another Velen delegate let out a piercing light flash, staggering backward. Lyra stopped mid-note. "What is it?" she asked sharply. They can't hold it," Rook growled. "Too much tension. Too much fear." The fragile peace broke like glass. The Astra commander unleashed a blinding pulse at the Velen envoy, who responded with a cloud of choking pheromones. The chamber erupted in chaos, scents clashing, lights stabbing at each other. Lyra stumbled, covering her ears. Even with her training, the overload of alien signals disoriented her. Rook stepped forward, his dark eyes narrowing. "Permission to scream," he said. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. Rook inhaled deeply, rolling his neck, and then he let it out. Not a note, not a word, but a raw, guttural scream. It shattered the air, slamming into the delegates like a physical blow. The walls shook, the glyphs cracked. Alien lights sputtered and went dark. The acrid scents burned away under the sheer force of a sound. Both sides collapsed to their knees, clutching their heads, their pheromones dissipating into nothing. Silence followed, deafening, heavy. Rook's voice cut through it. You two want to rip each other apart? Fine, but not while we're in the room. Lyra straightened slowly, regaining her composure. She shot Rook a sharp look, but didn't rebuke him. Not yet. Minutes later, the alien envoys sat in stunned silence, their lights dim and flickering weakly. Lyra addressed them again, softly this time. You see what we carry in our throats, she said. We could end this war in an instant. Not with bombs, not with ships, with one note, one scream. You felt it. Both delegations shifted uncomfortably. We don't want to use it, Lyra continued. But if you will not speak, if you will not listen, we will. The Velen envoy's crystal face cracked faintly, a sign of submission. The Astra commander's colors dulled to pale orange, a truce color. For the first time since their arrival, Lyra allowed herself to exhale. Later, alone with her team, Lyra sank onto a bench, rubbing her temples. That wasn't a win, she murmured. Marcel tilted his head. They stopped fighting. That counts for something. They didn't stop because they chose peace, she said bitterly. They stopped because they're afraid of us. Rook shrugged, unbothered. Fear is a start. We'll teach them respect later. Lyra looked at him, her jaw tight. That scream was reckless. It worked. That's not enough. Rook leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. Then teach them, Lyra. Show them there's more to us than screams. That's why you're here, right? To turn a weapon into a miracle? She didn't answer. Not right away. But in her chest, she felt the music stirring again. A song, waiting to be sung. Outside the cavern, the warships withdrew to opposite orbits, their weapons dimmed, their scent trails dissipating into the stars. The galaxy, for the briefest moment, held its breath. And in the silence that followed, the humans began tuning their instruments again, preparing for what came next. For all its violence, the galaxy had rules. Some places were sacred, and even the bravest warlords feared to trespass them. At the top of that list stood the Cathedral of Silence, a vast, ancient structure carved into the dead heart of a hollow moon. It was said to predate even the oldest empires, built by a species long vanished, whose name no one dared speak. No sound had ever been heard within its walls. And now the humans were being summoned there. Lyra Kai stood at the viewport of her shuttle, watching the cathedral grow larger as they approached. It floated alone in the darkness, a black spire etched with faint bioluminescent runes. Its surface gleamed like obsidian, though no light seemed to touch it directly, as if it absorbed all illumination, swallowing even the faint stars behind it. As their shuttle entered the landing corridor, she felt her stomach tighten. This feels like a trap, Rook muttered, his arms crossed. They've been looking for an excuse to snuff us since day one. And here it is. They don't need an excuse, Lyra said softly. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. That's comforting, Marcel murmured dryly from behind her. The shuttle docked with a faint clunk. The ramp lowered into silence. Even before they stepped out, the weight of it pressed down on them. The air was thick and cold, like standing in the depths of a frozen cave. The faint hum of their ship faded as they crossed the threshold, and then nothing. No echo of footsteps, no rustle of clothes. Even their own breaths felt swallowed by the walls. The cathedral interior was vast, a labyrinth of vaulted ceilings and columns of obsidian crystal that stretched higher than the eye could follow. The runes pulsed faintly along the walls, casting a dim silver glow. Lyra's team walked in a tight formation behind her, their instruments muted in their cases. At the end of the central hall waited the council, Ishranvel at the center, flanked by a full assembly of luminant dignitaries. Their lights glimmered weakly, their pheromones subdued in deference to the place. Lyra stopped at the base of the dais and bowed her head slightly. Ambassador Lyra Kai, Ishranvel began, its voice rendered through faint pulses of light rather than sound. You stand accused of desecration. Lyra kept her expression neutral. I have followed all protocols. You have brought noise into sacred chambers. You have ruptured neural patterns. You have used your weapon among delegates. I have also ended a war, she replied. The council's lights flared in irritation. That is not your place. Lyra raised her eyes. Then what is my place, Elder? To stand silently while you tear yourselves apart? To hold my breath until your kind decide humanity is useful? You summoned me here. If this is a trial, then let me speak. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ishranvel's glow softened slightly. We have summoned you here not only to judge you, it admitted, but to test you. If your voice can truly heal as you claim, then prove it. Here? Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Here? She asked carefully. The Elder's lights deepened to a somber blue. The cathedral has stood for 1,000 cycles without a sound. Not even the smallest breath of the air dares stir its stillness. If you can sing here and leave it unbroken, we will believe you. And if I fail, then humanity's voice will be banned from all council worlds. Forever. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Lyra glanced at Rook and Marcel. Marcel's face was pale. Rook's expression was unreadable. You can't sing here, Marcel whispered. The harmonics, this place eats sound. That's the point, Rook said flatly. Lyra closed her eyes. The weight of earth, of every opera house and scream stage that had raised her, every teacher who taught her how to craft her sound like steel and silk, pressed against her chest. If she failed, humanity's place in the galaxy would be over before it began. She removed her scarf and handed it to Marcel. Clear the hall, she said quietly. The council balked, lights fluttering in confusion. If you want me to succeed, she continued, louder now, you will give me space to work. No distractions, no scent, no light. For a long moment, Ishranvel simply stared at her. Then, with a faint pulse of acknowledgement, it signaled to the others. One by one, the delegates filed out, leaving her alone in the chamber. Even Rook and Marcel hesitated before backing toward the entrance. When the doors sealed behind them, Lyra was alone. The stillness was suffocating. Every step she took vanished into nothing. Every breath she drew disappeared as though swallowed by the walls. She unlatched her violin case, but left it closed. No accompaniment this time. This was hers to bear. She moved to the center of the chamber, standing on a faint circle of silver etched into the floor, and waited. At first, nothing came. Her throat felt dry. Her hands trembled faintly at her sides. But she forced herself to breathe, to listen. The air was so heavy it pressed in her chest, but she found its rhythm, subtle, like the faint beat of a distant drum. She remembered what her first teacher had told her as a child. The sound does not come from you. You borrow it from the world. You shape it. You return it. And so she began. The first note was so faint it barely qualified as sound. A breath more than a tone. Soft enough to almost fool even her own ears. But the air shifted. The faint silver runes on the walls seemed to blink in surprise. She held the note steady, then let it bloom, carefully layering it with the tiniest amount of vibrato. Not enough to crack the air, just enough to remind the cathedral that she was alive. Slowly, she wove it higher. Each note felt heavier than the last, pressing against her chest, her throat, her skull. The cathedral fought her, trying to swallow her sound, but she pressed back. She changed pitch delicately, sliding into a minor key, then back to major, her voice a ribbon of color in the darkness. At the center of the chamber, the silver circle beneath her feet began to glow faintly, pulsing in time with her breath. She raised her arms slightly and let the sound build, letting it fill her ribcage, her skull, the walls themselves. Her voice became more than sound, a force that hummed through the stones, brushing across the ancient runes like a lover's hand. When she finally stopped, the silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of the memory of her song, lingering in the walls like perfume in the air. For the first time since she entered the cathedral, she heard something else, a faint, low resonance that almost sounded like approval. The great doors opened behind her. Ishranvel floated into the chamber, flanked by the full assembly of the council. At first, no one spoke. Then the elder pulsed a soft gold light, the color of acknowledgement. "You have sung," it said, "and you have not broken the silence." Lyra bowed her head. "Perhaps," Ishranvel continued, its voice faintly tinged with something like awe, "your voice is more than a weapon after all." The other delegates flared faint lights of agreement, one by one. Lyra straightened, her expression calm, though her hands still trembled slightly at her sides. "Thank you, Elder," she said softly. Even her whisper seemed to hum through the chamber like a promise. Later, as they left the cathedral, Rook fell in a step beside her. "Show off," he murmured. Lyra allowed herself the faintest smile. "It worked, didn't it?" "For now." Marcel joined them, carrying the violin case. "You realize," he said quietly, "you've set the bar impossibly high now." Lyra glanced back at the black spire of the cathedral shrinking behind them. "Good," she said. "Let them hear what we're capable of." The cathedral's faint glow lingered in the distance, and for the first time, the galaxy's silence felt alive. For weeks after the Cathedral of Silence, the galaxy held its breath. The humans were no longer just a curiosity. They were a mystery and a threat. Whispers spread through the council. The sound weavers of Earth had conquered the cathedral without breaking it. Lyra Kai's name flared across alien scent nets and bioluminescent gossip like wildfire. Some called her a miracle worker. Others called her a heretic who had desecrated the most sacred place in the galaxy. And some decided she had to be silenced. It began with a summons. Lyra's shuttle received a message. No words, just a swirl of light and scent indicating an emergency assembly. Marcel furrowed his brow as he watched the patterns unfold on the screen. "That's strange. They want you at the edge of the ecliptial veil." "No reason given." Rook snorted. "Of course not. They don't need a reason." Lyra studied the message for a long moment before finally saying, "We'll go." Marcel shot her a look. "You can't possibly believe." "It doesn't matter what I believe," she interrupted softly. "If we don't go, we're guilty. If we go, we have a chance." Rook's dark eyes gleamed. "Or we walk straight into their trap." Lyra gave him a faint smile. "Then let's give them something to regret." The ecliptial veil was one of the galaxy's outermost regions, a vast, drifting field of silvery dust and shattered moons. Ships rarely traveled here, and those who did returned hushed and shaken. The human shuttle emerged from hyperslip into a frozen sea of glittering debris. At first, it seemed no one was there. Then, out of the darkness, dozens of ships lit up at once. A full fleet of Council warcraft, their lights shimmering with cold intent. Marcel went pale. "That's not an assembly." "No," Lyra agreed. "It's an execution." The comms flared to life, scent translation and light pulses flooding the cabin. Ishranvel's measured, glacial tones translated into sound at last. "You were warned. Humanity's voice is too dangerous, too unpredictable. You threaten the balance. You will not leave this place." Lyra inhaled deeply, her pulse steady. "I will not let you erase us," she replied, her voice carrying across the comms. Even at this distance, the fleet faltered slightly under the weight of her words. A moment of silence followed. Then the first shot was fired. The stars lit up in a riot of color and scent as the fleet opened fire. Pheromone bombs bloomed across the void, blinding flares stabbed through the darkness, and kinetic projectiles tore through the debris fields. The human shuttle shuddered under the first volley, shields flaring weakly. Marcel scrambled at the controls. "We can't outgun them." "We don't need to," Lyra murmured. She rose from her seat, her long black coat swirling around her. "We outsing them." She turned to Rook. "It's time." His grin was sharp and wild. Finally, they made their way to the resonance chamber, a forgotten artifact buried deep inside the shuttle's hold. Discovered months earlier at the edge of the veil, it was a circular room lined with living crystal, humming faintly with ancient energy. The humans had guessed it once belonged to the same long-vanished species that built the cathedral. Here, sound was not swallowed. Here, sound lived. Rook positioned himself at one end of the chamber, his fingers flexing. Marcel unpacked his violin and began tuning it with quick, nervous motions. Lyra stepped into the center of the circle. The floor glowed faintly beneath her feet, sensing her presence. On my cue, she said. Rook cracked his neck. Make it loud. The first wave of council ships closed in, weapons blazing. Marcel drew his bow across the strings, a single, shivering note that cut through the chaos outside. The resonance chamber amplified it, sending ripples of sound through the shuttle and into the void. The council fleet hesitated as their neural nets flared with confusion. Rook opened his mouth and screamed. It was no ordinary scream. It was raw and terrible, a roar that churned through space like a living storm, tearing at the fabric of their silent order. The nearest enemy ships cracked, their lights sputtering out as crews convulsed in their harnesses. Lyra lifted her arms. Her voice rose into the void, no longer soft and coaxing, but bright and sharp as a blade. Her aria began in a minor key, a lament for what might have been, then climbed higher, faster, twisting into something dangerous and unstoppable. The resonance chamber blazed to life, the walls alive with color and vibration. Her song shot out through the shuttle's hull, through the debris fields, through the stars. The council fleet reeled. Ships collided. Pheromone clouds dispersed uselessly as pilots lost control. And still she sang. But the council wasn't finished. From the darkness emerged their trump card, a massive flagship, older than any in the fleet, its surface carved with runes of protection. Inside its hull pulsed a strange energy, a null field designed to swallow sound. Lyra faltered as she felt its pull, her voice thinning in her throat. The null field extended, crushing the resonance chamber's harmonics. They're cutting us off, Marcel choked. Lyra's knees buckled as the field pressed down on her chest. Rook's scream faltered into silence. For the first time, the humans heard only their own ragged breathing. Lyra forced herself upright. Her eyes darted to the resonance chamber's central crystal, a jagged, shimmering shard humming faintly beneath the null field. She staggered toward it, her breath ragged, and pressed her palm against its surface. It flared under her touch, but faintly. I can't, she gasped. Reach it alone. Marcel's eyes widened. Then he stepped forward, placing his hand beside hers. Then Rook, his fingers curled against the crystal, knuckles white. The shard blazed suddenly, as though sensing their unity. Lyra's voice surged back, brighter than before. Not just hers anymore, but a choir carried on the backs of every song humanity had ever sung. She threw her head back and unleashed the aria of war. This was no gentle melody. It was a defiance born of blood and grief, love and fury, the sound of millions of years of struggle compressed into one impossible, triumphant note. The null field shattered. The flagship cracked, its runes splintering into fragments of light. Around them, the council fleet dissolved into chaos as ships lost power, pilots collapsed, and weapons went dark. The silence that followed was different than any before. It wasn't empty. It was full of awe and fear. When the last council ship retreated into the veil, Lyra collapsed to her knees, her breath heaving. The resonance chamber dimmed around her, its crystal humming softly, as though content. Marcel knelt beside her, gently resting a hand on her shoulder. Rook leaned against the wall, grinning despite the blood on his lip. Well, he rasped, voice hoarse, I think they heard us. Lyra managed a faint smile through her exhaustion. Good. She rose slowly, her scarf falling back around her shoulders. They need to understand, she murmured. Our voice isn't just a weapon. She stared out the viewport at the empty stars beyond, the faint glimmers of broken ships drifting into the dark. It's who we are. Later, as they drifted back towards safer space, a faint transmission crackled through the comms. Ishramvel's lights rendered into sound. You have proved your strength, but strength is not enough. You will stand before us once more and sing. Lyra's smile was quiet and sharp. Then we'll be ready. Behind her, the resonance chamber glowed faintly, as though waiting for the next song. The galaxy waited. On 1,000 worlds, light signals and scent plumes carried a single message. Humanity is coming to sing its final song. In the days after the aria of war, the Council of Luminants retreated into itself, wounded and afraid. Lyra's defiance in the ecliptial veil had shattered fleets and cracked the silence of stars. But victory came with a cost. The galaxy now saw humans not only as dangerous but uncontrollable. If she failed here, if her voice faltered now, humanity would be silenced forever. And so Lyra Kai stood before the full assembly of the Luminant Council, her breath steady despite the weight of entire civilizations pressing down on her shoulders. She had come to sing the miracle note. The council's hall was rebuilt for this final trial, larger than even the Cathedral of Silence, its vaulted walls humming with nervous energy. Delegates from every known species lined the chamber. Insectoid ostra, crystalline velen, the scent-weaving saffin, and hundreds more. Their shells and scales glimmered in uneasy patterns, their colors muted with fear. At the center of it all floated Ishranvel, its massive, translucent form dull and cold, like a dying star. Lyra Kai, it said, its voice rendered into faint human tones through the translation halo. You have been given every chance. We have seen the devastation your kind can bring. You claim your voice can also heal, that it can bring us together. It pulsed faintly. Show us. The hall fell silent. Even silence, Lyra thought, felt alive here, like a beast holding its breath. Marcel and Rook stood behind her, both pale but resolute. Marcel leaned close and whispered, "What if it doesn't work?" Lyra didn't take her eyes off the elder. "Then they'll kill us." But not quietly. Rook chuckled under his breath, a dry rasp that made Marcel flinch. "That's the spirit." Lyra stepped forward onto the platform, the sound of her boots swallowed instantly by the chamber's stillness. She could feel the weight of countless alien eyes, luminous and scentless, fixed on her. This time there would be no resonance chamber to help her, no orchestral accompaniment, no screaming backup. This song would be hers alone. She closed her eyes and let the memory of sound fill her. Her first teacher's warm hands on her shoulders, her mother's lullabies, the roar of audiences rising to their feet, the silence after her first catastrophic note, when she cracked a chandelier during rehearsal and still kept singing. All of it was part of her. All of it was human. And she knew now what the galaxy still refused to understand. The human voice was not just a weapon or a bomb or even a gift. It was who they were. She opened her mouth and sang. The first note was soft, so quiet it barely stirred the air. But it carried. The delegates shifted uncomfortably as the sound brushed over them, faint but undeniable. Then she let it grow, layer by layer, weaving a melody that rose like dawn over frozen mountains. Her voice cut through the alien senses, threading through their neural patterns, coaxing light and scent back into harmony. The chamber walls began to vibrate faintly, their runes shimmering in rhythm. For the first time in living memory, the Luminant assembly was perfectly still. No flickering colors, no scent, no movement. They listened. The song shifted now, deepening, reaching into places even she hadn't touched before. Her notes carried sorrow, yes, but also love. The memory of Earth's oceans crashing into cliffs. The hush of snowfall and empty streets. The laughter of children who didn't yet understand war. She let all of it pour out of her, unafraid of its weight. At her feet, faint motes of golden light began to rise, the chamber itself reacting to her song. She reached higher now, into registers so delicate they should have shattered the alien minds, and yet they didn't. Instead, the delegates' shells and crystals began to glow in unison, their colors softening, their pheromones curling sweet and calm into the air. Some began to weep, or their alien equivalent of weeping, as the sound rewove what centuries of silence had broken. But she wasn't finished. Lyra drew a final breath and let it out as a single, pure note. It wasn't loud. It didn't crack walls or bring fleets crashing down. It simply was a sound so perfect, so full, that it seemed to hold the whole galaxy inside it. Even Rook, hardened and wild, fell to his knees. Marcel wept openly, clutching his violin to his chest. And in the silence that followed, Lyra felt the walls themselves sigh in relief. When she finally opened her eyes, the chamber glowed with soft golden light. The delegates sat transfixed, their bioluminescence synchronized, their scents mingling in a single sweet spiral. Even Ishranvel's vast body shimmered faintly, its dull colors brightening as though it too were waking from a long sleep. For a long time, no one moved. Then the elder spoke, its voice soft, almost reverent. "We have heard." It pulsed again, faint but clear. "And we understand." The rest of the assembly erupted in waves of light and scent, not chaotic this time, but harmonious, a unanimous signal of awe and submission. Later, as she stood outside the chamber, Lyra felt the weight of it settle over her. She had done it, but she also knew what came next. The galaxy would not forget the sound she had unleashed, and neither would she. Rook joined her, leaning casually against a column, his grin lopsided. "Well," he rasped, "you broke them." "I didn't break them," she murmured. "I fixed them." "Same thing," he muttered. Marcel appeared at her other side, his eyes still damp. "What do we call it?" he asked softly. Lyra tilted her head, thinking. Then she smiled faintly. "The miracle note," she said. A week later, Earth was granted its seat on the council, not just as a member, but as the voice of peace. The title passed to Lyra, though she suspected no one else would dare claim it anytime soon. The galaxy changed after that day. Somewhere deep in the dark, fleets still waited. Wars still simmered. But in the quiet spaces, the halls, the cathedrals, the great chambers of the stars, beings of every kind found themselves humming strange, soft melodies they didn't yet understand. And when they closed their eyes, they could still hear it, faint, fragile, but alive. The sound that kills, and heals, and remembers. On her final night in the chamber before returning to Earth, Lyra stood alone in the center of the dais. She hummed to herself, just a whisper of a melody, and let the sound fade gently into silence. This time, the silence that followed didn't feel empty at all. It felt whole. Some say the galaxy never fully recovered from the humans, that even the oldest empires now pause before lighting their warships or sharpening their blades, that deep in their shells and crystals and clouds, they remember what it felt like to be undone by a single human voice and remade. And on Earth, when Lyra Kai sings to packed halls of her own kind, the stars themselves seem to lean in closer, listening. Because somewhere out there, they still hear her, and they remember.